The chamber pulsed with quiet tension. High above the silvered curve of Veridan's neutral moon, the Galactic Confederation's observation dome loomed like a frozen eye, wide and unblinking. Inside, tiered rows of holographic monitors cast shifting lights across the solemn faces of gathered delegates, each display showing live feeds from the Crucible. And in every one of them, the humans were still alive. Ambassador Isthar stood at the forefront, arms folded tight against his scaled chest, his tail coiled in unreadable stillness. Cold eyes flicked from one monitor to the next, as if he might catch some flaw in the data. But the numbers were unwavering, clean, undeniable. Countdown complete, came the sterile voice of the system interface. Day 6, Hour 1. Subjects. Active. Star narrowed his gaze. There has been an error. No species endures this long. Recheck the neural telemetry. I already have. Dr. Elon's voice cracked slightly as he responded. The normally uncheckable researcher, his long fingers curled around a hovering datapad, sounded almost reverent. Cognitive functions are optimal. Physical vitals are within margin. They show signs of mild stress, perhaps elevated cortisol, but otherwise, they're fine. Counselor Vextel made a low, keening noise. Her bioluminescent tentacles writhed in distress, casting nervous shadows across the polished obsidian floor. They are not meant to be fine. Not in there. The Crucible was not merely a test. It was the test simulation of every hell the galaxy could conceive, built from the compiled data of 1,200 Deathworlds, and calibrated to break even the strongest. It had destroyed empires. The Krogan Dominion lasted 2 days. The Nexury's brightest minds had cracked within. Ours, even the Zepyrians, with their crystalline neural shields, had succumbed to atmospheric trauma before sunset on day 1. But these humans, a new screen flickered to life. Scherer turned sharply. The humans were visible through a thermal feed 3. Figures navigating the shattered terrain. Earthborn, simple in dress, unshielded. One Marcus, a male with short dark hair, was apparently singing. Not in distress, but in rhythm. Another Sarah, the female, was collecting samples and laughing as geysers of acidic mist erupted nearby. The third, David, was cooking something over a fire pit made from debris. Are they playing? Vextel whispered, horror tinting her voice. This level of chaos should have driven them into madness. Thar said nothing. His slitted eyes were fixed on the humans, like prey that had turned predator. The Crucible had just activated the gravity inversion protocol, one of the deadliest. Phases. Whole boulders were floating in the air. The ground fractured, folding in on itself. Most species would be clawing at escape hatches or praying to forgotten gods. The humans were leaping between rocks, as though in a playground, there. Shouts of delight echoing through the feed. This is mockery, Thar finally murmured, though his voice held less anger and more disbelief. They are not enduring. They are thriving. Dr. Elon slowly turned his datapad toward the council. They aren't fighting to survive, he said softly. They're adapting, and they're having fun. A silence spread like ice over the room. No one moved. No one breathed. For the first time in its history, the Galactic Confederation faced a truth it was not prepared for. They had built a nightmare, and the humans had just turned it into recess. The Crucible had never needed adjustment before. It had never required escalation. Every species that entered its shifting, hostile depths came out either broken or never came out at all. But now, as the seventh sunrise crested over the simulation's artificial skyline, the overseer algorithms hesitated, for the first time unsure whether to continue as programmed or rewrite the rules entirely. Inside the observation dome, the atmosphere was suffocating. Counselor Vextel hovered near the central holodisplay, her translucent skin dimmed in alarm. We must increase the pressure. Activate phase protocol Delta 4. That should end this. Farce. Xi didn't respond immediately. His gaze lingered on the live feed. Sarah was now swimming across a boiling acid river, her body shielded by nothing more than a repurposed tarp she'd wrapped around herself like a poncho. David stood on the opposite shore, casually betting Marcus 5 credits she'd make it across in under 2 minutes. The human woman surfaced with a triumphant yell and began laughing through the comms. "They are not resisting the simulation," Starr said, his voice colder than before. "They are embracing it." Dr. Elon's fingers danced across his datapad, pulling up historical overlays. This was not supposed to be possible. When the Crucible was designed, we drew from every documented environmental extremity. Plasma storms from Wargathy Prime, bone-breaking gravity fields from Tralexis, zero-atmosphere entropy spirals, theoretical constructs designed to crush resolve, incinerate flesh, fracture reason. And yet, Vextel interrupted bitterly, our grand test is now a theme park attraction to these mammals. Dr. Elon nodded solemnly. Yes, and that's precisely the problem. On screen, Marcus had begun singing again. Something called sea shanties, according to Elon's translator module. As he sang, he carried a bundle of sulfur crystals to their makeshift shelter, a structure the humans had casually assembled from salvaged Crucible debris, bound by hand-woven fiber. Cordage. The alien winds howled, micrometeors fell like rain. But the human camp remained intact and cheerful. Starr finally turned from the screens, tail twitching behind him. Remind me again of the Krogan incident. How long did they last? 2 days, Elon replied. Their strongest warriors collapsed during the gravity phase. Their leader went feral and attacked his own men. And the Negeri retreated voluntarily after 1 day. Lost 3 minds to feedback loops from the magnetic distortion protocols. And yet these humans, Starr hissed, are grilling rations over lava vents and asking if we have more difficult settings. A silence fell. Then, from the far edge of the room, a new voice crackled infiltered through the Crucible's surface comms. "Yo, command center," came David O'Coffer's unmistakably upbeat tone. "If you guys are watching this, and we know you are Sarah's, thinking we add a point system. Like if she tags all 5 floating hazard orbs during the next tectonic quake, she wins. If not, Marcus gets to sleep on the warm side of the rock pile. Thoughts?" The council chamber went dead quiet. Vextel's tentacles sagged as if in resignation. "We made this place to be hell." Dr. Elon exhaled slowly. "And they turned it into a game show." Seether's claws tapped against the floor, each sound echoing louder than the last. "Perhaps we must accept the unthinkable." "And what is that?" Vextel asked. "That these Deathworlders ... do not merely survive hell." Xi's voice dropped into something darker, more primal. "They came from it. None of them saw the Crucible as a threat anymore. Not the humans inside, and not the ones outside, watching. What once defined the galaxy's ultimate trial now risked being rebranded as nothing more than sport, and the galaxy had no idea what that meant. Not yet. The Crucible rumbled again, deep and seismic, its artificial tectonics simulating the rupture of planetary plates. Thunder rolled overhead. No, not thunder, but the controlled detonation of subterranean faults, a chaos algorithm so precise it could crack mountains without disturbing a single footprint. For most species, this phase alone would induce total sensory collapse. But to the humans? It was just another Wednesday dot inside the observation dome. Ambassador Starr stood frozen before the largest monitor. The feed zoomed in on Marcus' chin, who had tied a length of synthetic rope between two craggy outcrops suspended meter by an active gravity inversion field. The human was now walking across the line, arms stretched, grinning like a predator. On a hunt. On the fractured ground below, Sarah Thompson sheared and recorded data. David Okafor, meanwhile, had constructed a slingshot from tension wire and a discarded utility panel. He launched pebbles upward toward Marcus's boots with gleeful precision, trying to make him wobble. The council chamber had never been so. Silent. Councillor Vextel broke it with a whisper. "They're not even trying to escape." "No," Dr. Elon murmured. "Because they don't feel trapped." Starr said nothing. His gaze was hard, reptilian, but beneath the scales, and old. Fear had begun to stir. Not the kind born of weapons or warships. Something deeper. Something ancient. The fear of a force not just stronger, but unknowable. The feed switched as a quake erupted near Sector 19C of the simulation. There, the Crucible activated one of its most infamous protocols, the Tempest Maw. From the ground burst a blizzard of molten debris and static-laced ion storms, a sight that had once sent seasoned warriors into fits of paralysis. The humans? They, huddled together inside a shallow crater, wrapped in thermal foil made from shredded hazard banners. David pulled out a small deck of plastic cards from his backpack and started dealing. "They're playing cards," Vextel croaked, her voice fraying. "Yes," Elon said slowly. "Hearts, I believe. A human strategy game played during periods of rest." Starr turned, his tail snapping behind him like a whip. Why would they rest now? Why would they play when death looms at every angle? "Because this isn't death to them," Elon replied, eyes wide with realization. "This is normal. They evolved on a world where stress is not an event, it's a condition of life." On screen, Sarah smiled. 3 of hearts. Ha! Marcus laughed. "Eat plasma, Sarah? You're holding the queen. I know it." Vextel's luminous tendrils twitched with rising unease. "They're unstable." "No," Isdar said. "They're balanced in the instability." He walked slowly to the center of the chamber, the weight of centuries behind his movement. Every species that faced the Crucible approached it as a crucifixion, a final test of pain, endurance, will. But to them, his voice dropped. To them, it's a puzzle box. Elon brought up the Earth data again, running simultaneous streams of tectonic activity, recorded natural disasters, predatory species counts, and radiation belt anomalies. Their home is more volatile than half of our simulation's programmed hazards. And they lived there for millennia without ever calling it extreme. A beat passed. Then a soft crackle echoed through the speakers. This is Marcus. Quick request. The seismic patterns are getting kind of predictable. Any chance you guys could, I don't know, throw in a rogue moon or something? Spice it up?" Vextel shuddered. Elon sat down. Starr stared long at the Crucible's glowing display, where the simulation bent, buckled, and still failed to break the laughing Deathworlders. They had built this hell to judge others, but the humans had just judged them. The lights inside the observation dome dimmed as the Crucible shifted again, this time entering its phase Omega, a compound simulation of cascading planetary extinction events, acid hurricanes, volcanic lightning, radiation spikes. It was the kind of death spiral that had vaporized civilizations. But on the central monitor, the humans had just finished building a swing strung between 2 twisted beams of metal remnants from an exploded skybridge. The crude contraption swayed gently in the red-tinged wind as Sarah Thompson tested its strength with a whoop of joy. David cheered her on while Marcus prepared what looked suspiciously like marshmallows over a field of superheated ground glass. The Crucible, despite its ever-increasing brutality, had become a sandbox. A playground for Deathworlders. Ambassador. Istar stood statue still, staring at the data feed pouring down the display wall. His pupils narrowed to slits. "This isn't possible," he muttered. Though his voice no longer held certainty, only disbelief, Dr. Elon tapped a glowing control. Rune and brought up a new display. "Perhaps it is. I've analyzed over 200 environmental variables from Earth's surface. What we considered hostile is home to them." The holofeed shifted. First came the visuals. Hurricane after hurricane whipping across continents. Floods swallowing megacities. Volcanoes turning skies red. Then the numbers. Wind speeds exceeding 300 kph. Tectonic shear values higher than on the Crucible's final level. Native fauna capable of liquefying organs with venom or worse, brute force. And then, without pause, the catalog of human survivors. Farmers rebuilding after tsunamis. Children walking to school through radiation-blasted snowfields. Entire cities learning to live with instability, as if it were normal. Vext. I'll turn away from the feed, her tentacles limp with something that resembled shame. "How did we miss this?" Shidar answered, but not with pride. "Because we were arrogant. We saw their world's beauty and mistook it for weakness. We measured forests and oceans, not the storms inside them." Elon's voice dropped. "Not the storms inside them." He switched the feed again. A clip appeared in archival. News transmission from Earth, centuries old. It showed footage of humans in the midst of a global pandemic. Medical workers collapsing from exhaustion, only to rise again. Children drawing rainbows on shattered windows. Firefighters walking into infernos. Protesters demanding justice, even under fire. "They suffer," Elon said, voice catching. "And still, they laugh." The feed snapped back to the Crucible, where David Okafor now balanced on a fallen stasis beam while juggling 3 improvised torches. Behind him, the sky tore open with ion lightning. Marcus strummed on a makeshift string instrument. Sarah sketched something in the ash with a stylus, her brow furrowed in calm focus. "They are not confused by pain," Star whispered. "They're fluent in it." Vexthal looked sick. "This was meant to measure strength." "It has," Star said, "but not the kind we thought." He gestured to the Crucible, its storms raging uselessly against the humans who refused to fear it. "We tested muscle. They brought will." The truth landed hard. The Crucible was never flawed, had simply met its match. Earth wasn't just another world. It was the Crucible before the Crucible. And the humans who came from it were forged in fire long before they ever set foot in this simulation. There turned slowly, eyes scanning the shocked faces of fellow delegates. "Prepare a full rewrite of the Confederation's species assessment protocols," he said quietly. "We've been asking the wrong question all along." "What question is that?" Vexthal asked. Stir's gaze returned to the screen, where Sarah was now lounging in the swing, humming under plasma-lit skies. "We've been asking if others can survive what we build," he said. "But now, we must ask if we can survive them." The Crucible trembled as Phase Omega entered its final escalation. From orbit, it looked like a wounded world tearing itself apart, landmasses buckling under gravity inversions, atmosphere howling with corrosive gases, lightning chains leaping across fault lines like serpents of flame. Inside, tectonic plates shifted every few seconds, producing 1,000-meter cliffs and collapsing them again. Firestorms swept across plains of shattered metal and glass. To any observer, it was the image of apocalypse. To the humans, it was Tuesday. Inside the observation dome, silence had given way to an almost religious awe. Dozens of delegates from across the Confederation sat in stillness, eyes wide, no longer speaking. The galactic elite, some older than stars, others evolved beyond flesh, could only stare at the screens as Earth's children walked through the end of the world like they were on a team-building retreat. "Begin recording behavior logs," Dr. Elon murmured, his voice flat with disbelief. "Every movement, every emotional expression. We may never witness something like this again." Counselor Vextel floated closer, her translucent tentacles dimmed to a dull violet. "They should be screaming by now. Any other species would be clawing at the ground." "They're singing again," Elon said, gesturing to the monitor. Sure enough, Marcus Chin had returned to his rock perch, strumming on his stringed contraption, made from Crucible debris and what appeared to be his own bootlaces. His voice carried through the line, warbling some folk song about climbing mountains and chasing stars. Behind him, David Okafor was doing handstands on a floating chunk of metal, laughing each time he fell into the spinning gravity pool. Sarah Thompson had climbed one of the new jagged cliffs to sketch the storm pattern into a notebook, muttering something about a beautiful data set. "They don't even perceive this as danger," Vextel whispered. "Is it denial? Madness?" "No," Starr said, his eyes narrowed to slits. "It's adaptation. They're not in denial. They've accepted this, bent it around themselves." He paused. "They've made it theirs." Dr. Elon switched to bio readings. Their adrenaline levels are elevated, but not dangerously. Cortisol steady. Neurological patterns show synchronized theta bursts. They're experiencing what humans call flow. Vextel recoiled. "Flow? In phase omega?" "They're not afraid," Starr said. "They're engaged." The screens shifted again as the Crucible deployed its final mechanic. The obsidian fall dot, a storm of black meteorites streaked from above, each supercharged with nanite plasma, each carrying enough kinetic energy to level a city. On screen, Sarah spotted the incoming swarm. Instead of running, she shouted, "Let's play the dodge game." David whooped. "Rules? Don't die." Marcus grinned. "Got it. Loser makes breakfast." Then they ran. Not in panic, but like athletes chasing a finish line, laughing, dodging, sliding under fire. One meteor smashed behind them, sending a wall of ash into the air, and Marcus rode the blast like a surf wave, yelling, "Woo!" In the dome, no one spoke. Ther's claws gripped the railing. "We tried to test their survival." Elon nodded. "Slowly, but we've revealed something more terrible." "What could be worse than a species immune to fear?" Vextel asked, voice cracking. Starr turned, and his words fell heavy across the room. "A species that finds joy in the storm." The silence that followed was not born of awe, but dread, because true joy meant the humans hadn't reached their limit dot, not even close. The observation dome dimmed further, as if the artificial lights themselves feared what they were witnessing. The Crucible's environment had reached levels never intended for prolonged exposure. The designers had built it with an upper threshold, an unspoken boundary that no test subject was meant to approach, let alone surpass. The humans had shattered that boundary like it was a brittle window pane. Ambassador Zdar stood unmoving, his reptilian eyes locked on the live feed. He didn't speak. He didn't blink. He simply watched as Sarah Thompson sketched out a crude map of the latest terrain shift, while plasma geysers erupted in the background like fireworks. The winds howled at hurricane velocity. Radiation levels pulsed in lethal waves. Gravity blinked in and out of alignment. But Sarah adjusted her footing with casual grace and kept drawing. "There, stable," Dr. Elon said quietly, his voice raw with something close to reverence. "No signs of panic, no neural fracturing, no chemical distress. In fact," he stopped, squinting at the data, "their neural engagement has increased. They're not breaking. They're thriving." On another screen, David Okafor was seen stacking polished black stones into a tower despite the gale-force winds threatening to scatter them. Each time one toppled, he chuckled, picked it up, and started again. Beside him, Marcus Chin began carving words into a slab of molten cooled metal. The translation feed tried to interpret them. Note to future test subjects, Vexthel. Read aloud. Bring snacks. It wasn't just defiance. It was comfort, confidence, ownership. We created the Crucible to measure endurance, Star said at last. But that presumes there is a limit. These three... He stopped. No words could capture what the humans were demonstrating. They've surpassed every metric, Elon said. Even psychological degradation. Vexthel's voice trembled. How? Why don't they fall apart? The room fell into silence as the screen cycled to another feed one Elon had queued up earlier. A series of human tragedies. The volcanic obliteration of an Earth city, the orbital fall of a moon base, a war zone reduced to ash. Footage showed humans digging through rubble with bare hands, others holding hands in hospital beds, singing in shelters, rebuilding while the fires still burned. Elon said nothing. He simply let the images play. They live inside the storm, Star said at last. They were born into it, molded by it. No species should have to endure what they have, Vexthel whispered. And yet, Star replied, they don't just endure. They carry it, laugh through it. They build swings in fire and play games in chaos. What kind of creature survives? Trauma by turning it into joy? Dr. Elon looked down at his datapad and slowly turned the screen to show them a quote from Earth literature, an ancient one. The author's name had long faded, but the line remained. We do not rise in spite of the pain. We rise because of it. Star stepped forward, closer to the screen, where Sarah and David were now teaching. Marcus a dance-hopping across unstable terrain in rhythm with the shifting seismic tremors. Their joy was not the absence of fear. It was the mastery of it. They've made friends with the fire, Star murmured. What could burn others fuels them. The delegates stared, wide-eyed, because for the first time, they weren't witnessing a species proving its worth to the galaxy. They were witnessing the reason the galaxy had survived this long at all, and they had only just begun to understand what humans truly were. The Crucible's sky cracked open. The simulated atmosphere, built from borrowed storms across hundreds of worlds, split with lightning so dense it stitched the sky like thread through cloth. The ground below fractured into floating slabs, gravity flickering between crush and drift. An inferno burst from beneath the crust, sending plumes of molten metal arcing into the air like fountains from hell. Phase Omega had passed its design limit. The Crucible was no longer running on protocol. It was improvising. Inside the observation dome, a low alarm tone echoed one that had never sounded before. Dr. Elon froze mid-step. His datapad flashed. Red. Even the Confederation's most ancient species, the ones whose bodies were part plasma, part time-folded matter, stared in quiet terror. Override failure? Vexthel whispered. What does that mean? It means, Elon said. Slowly, the Crucible is evolving in real time to challenge them. It's adapting. It's learning from the humans. You're saying the simulation is trying to survive them? Star asked, his voice hollow. Yes, Elon whispered. On the screen, Marcus, Sarah, and David stood on the edge of a crumbling ridgeline. Below them, the landscape churned like a sea of jagged teeth. From the clouds, shards of glowing obsidian rained down. Between the chaos, figures began to emerge, artificial constructs, once used to simulate hostile life forms. But these weren't the standard opponents. They were copies. 3 humanoid shapes stepped out of the storm, their features eerily similar to the humans themselves. Each moved with human rhythm, wore scavenged Crucible gear, and even mimicked their mannerisms. This was the final adaptation. The Crucible was no longer trying to kill them with the environment. It was trying to kill them with themselves. In the dome, no one spoke. Then the comm system crackled. "Yo, Control?" It was David again. His voice was light, relaxed, but carried a new note. "Focus. Looks like your simulation grew a spine." "Yeah," Sarah chimed in. "We were wondering when it'd start copying us." "I give it 5 minutes," Marcus added. "Sarah's going to outthink it. David's going to confuse it. And I'm going to sing until it malfunctions." Star leaned forward, his claws gripping the console. "They know. They see what the Crucible is doing. And they're still not afraid," Elon whispered. The screen showed the 3 humans springing into action. Sarah flanked her copy, dodging plasma arcs while calling out environmental variables to Marcus. David shouted out erratic math problems mid-combat just to throw off the simulacra's logic loops. Marcus started his song again louder, defiant. The simulation stuttered. One of the copies seized and collapsed. The other 2 followed. Within moments, the final assault had failed. The humans stood in the eye of the storm, wind and fire swirling around them, backs straight. They didn't look victorious. They looked curious. Sarah bent to pick up one of the shattered constructs. "So that's the best it could do?" "Hope. It's got a sequel," David said. Marcus laughed. "Nah, let's go home. I'm out of snacks." In the dome, the alarm finally ceased. The Crucible had shut itself down. And in the vacuum of silence that followed, Ambassador Star stepped into the center of the council floor, turned on the primary communication relay, and addressed the humans directly. "Marcus Chin? Sarah Thompson? David Okafor? You have passed the Crucible. More than that, you have changed it. We welcome you as full members of the Galactic Confederation." The reply came seconds later. "Already? Man," David groaned, "we were just getting warmed up." And somewhere deep in the dome's archive systems, a single flag updated beneath Earth's entry. Crucible status: incomplete. Challenge unresolvable. Subject species UNCLASSI FIA far below the observation dome. Deep in the Crucible's command core, lights flickered and systems rebooted in silence. For the first time in its long existence, the simulation had terminated itself, not from failure, but surrender. Across the Confederation's vast network of worlds, every data stream, every live feed, and every monitoring probe went still. The final image was already viral. 3 humans dirty, tired, but grinning, standing shoulder to shoulder in a stormlit crater, while the simulation collapsed around them like a God-giving up dot in the dome. The silence was thick enough to choke on. No one moved. No one breathed. Star stood before the central podium, tail motionless, scales dull in the low light. Around him, dozens of delegates remained frozen in disbelief, not because they feared the humans, but because they finally understood. Them, Counselor Vextel, once so sure of her intellect, her pride in the Crucible's infallibility, now floated lower than ever before. Her voice was barely audible. "We built that simulation to define the edge of survival, and they turned it into a playground," Istar said softly. Dr. Ilon looked up from his console, his hands still trembling. "They didn't just pass the test. They forced it to evolve. Then they beat that, too." Another delegate murmured from the side. "It's not just their strength or resilience. It's how they wear it, casually, as if surviving hell is simply a Tuesday afternoon." Star turned toward the Galactic Assembly floor. "Then let this be recorded in every language. Let it echo through every system. Humanity did not survive. The Crucible survived them." He looked back to the feed one last time. The humans were waving at a drone camera, smiling like tourists. Sarah flashed a peace sign. David pointed finger guns. Marcus leaned forward and said, "Hey, do we get t-shirts or something?" In the corner of the dome, a translator AI quietly short-circuited trying to assign cultural context to that sentence. Star turned away. He felt something ancient stir in the base of his spine. Not fear, not admiration. Awe. Reverence. Prepare reclassification order, he said, his voice gaining strength. Effective immediately, Earth shall no longer be listed as a Tier 4 emerging world. The crowd shifted uneasily. Vexthal hesitated. Then, what are they? Star looked at her with tired eyes. They are Tier 0. A hush swept the room. That classification had never been used. It was theoretical, reserved in ancient protocols, for species that broke classification, for forces of nature in the shape of people. Tier 0, uncontainable, unpredictable, unchallengeable. A delegate from the Mer Collective whispered, "What happens now?" Sier's answer was slow and grim. "Now, we ask them what they want." Back on the surface of the dying simulation, Marcus wiped sweat from his brow and looked up at the camera again. "We done?" "Great, because I just realized something." "What?" Sarah asked, still sketching cloud density in her notebook. "I think this whole thing was supposed to scare us." David snorted. "That's adorable," Sarah grinned. "So what now?" Marcus looked at the sky, then back at the drone. "We go home. We tell Earth. And the next time the galaxy builds a test for us." He gave a crooked smile. "Maybe they'll ask us what level to start on." In the months that followed, the Crucible was shut down. Not because it was flawed, but because the galaxy realized it had never been testing others. It had been testing itself. And when the humans laughed, it learned fear. Forever after, in the halls of power and in whispers among the stars, one truth echoed: every species failed the test. But the Deathworlders? They laughed.